Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. My name is Beth, and I would like to introduce Paul, who will be discussing utilizing Autodesk Moldflow Communicator to review analysis results. Throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask us questions along the way. We have a number of support specialists, including myself, Justin, and Javier in the background, who are all ready to answer any questions you may have. As usual, we'll also be posting the slide deck to the public folder listed there, which is autodesk.box.com/moldflow28 for you to be able to download it. The webinar recording will also be posted to YouTube afterwards, and we will be sending out an email with the YouTube link as well as the link to the Autodesk public box folder. And again, there's the question box, so please feel free to ask us questions throughout the course of the webinar. Before we get into the content of today's webinar, I wanted to quickly cover some previous topics and upcoming topics that we'll also be having future webinars on. So some of the previous topics are setting up and interpreting DOE results and also utilizing Helios PFA within Moldflow Insight. Some of the upcoming topics we will be presenting on are what's new in Moldflow 2018.2 and tips and tricks in Moldflow Advisor. And again, if you're ever curious about any of these past webinars, like I mentioned, this webinar recording will be posted and uploaded to our YouTube channel, which is Autodesk Sim 360, our Autodesk Sim 360 page, and it will be listed under the Build Your Simulation IQ section. And if you receive this invite for the webinar from a colleague, you can always go to our forums or any of the other options listed there to sign up for yourself. That way you'll be able to see a series listed on your email calendar, and you'll be able to easily join the webinars that you would like to attend. And as a quick summary, we'd like to share with those of you who are not familiar with our knowledge website, we do have a website that the support team creates and writes articles based on support topics that users like yourselves are coming to us with. So please feel free to explore some of the recent articles that we have listed here. And you can also go to the Moldflow Insight troubleshooting article page that has a list of all the articles we have published. As you can see here, the most up-to-date version of the Simulation Job Manager is 6.2, which is included in the Moldflow 2018.1 release. This was the same Simulation Job Manager as in the 2018 release. Also available in your Autodesk accounts are the 2018.1 update one for Synergy and Insight, which are listed under the Product Enhancement section of your Autodesk account. These will not be separate installs, but instead they are installed on top of Synergy and Insight 2018.1 as updates. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to Paul.
Thanks, Beth, for that introduction.
Sure.
So this is today's agenda. I'm going to be looking at Autodesk Moldflow Communicator. What is it and its features? We're then going to look at the Moldflow results file, which we read into Communicator, the criteria file, which we create inside Synergy, and then we're going on to a demonstration to show how this is all done. So Autodesk Simulation Communicator is a standalone product. It's free for anyone to download from the web. For people that have Synergy already, it's installed as part of the Synergy install. And basically, anyone can use it. It's used to share Moldflow results with colleagues, your customers, so people in your company around the world. It's a way to quantify and compare and show what you've been doing in the analysis. It supports Moldflow Insight and Advisors. So from both those softwares, you can write out the Moldflow Communicator file. So Communicator will read in two different types of file. It reads in the actual Moldflow results file, which is a .mfr file, and a criteria file to compare your results with a set criteria. Some of the features, we can view results dynamically and interactively. So the beauty of Communicator is for people that don't have synergy and access to the analysis, you're able to send your results to the end customer or colleagues so they can then see what analysis was done, rotate the model, look at it in more depth. We can export up to 2 studies in one MFR file. That way we're able to compare results between 2 different scenarios. In my demonstration later, I've just got basically two identical parts with different gate locations. We can also write inside Synergy a criteria file where we can then compare the studies with given criteria. We'll cover that a little later. If the model happens to be the same model and you're comparing, we are able to synchronize the model orientation and result selection. So it's easy to sort of see what's different between the two studies. So in the Moldflow results file, this is a single compressed file containing 1 or 2 studies. In the demonstration, I'll show how you export 2. You can have user specified results. So if you don't use the standard results from the results list and you make your own custom results, you can just tick and mark them for export as well. So in Synergy, with a result highlighted, we don't have to have it displayed. You just right click to get the submenu come up and we do mark for export. We can mark all results for export if you wish, but maybe the idea of Communicator is to give a limited set of results to your end user, your colleagues, to make a better story about what they need to see. If they've got all the results, then some of them might not mean anything and get a bit confusing. But one thing you could do is mark all results for export if you want to keep a copy of what you've done in the analysis for future reference, like a backup. And before you export, once you mark all your results to export, we need to save the study. Otherwise, any changes before you export won't be in the MFR file. And we just basically go up to results, export, and choose Moldflow results. So Communicator as an analysis quantification. Communicator ensures results come from one reliable source. So you've got your Moldflow expert that's run the analysis. They will write up what they've done, the results, and it's from a reliable source. So the people looking at the Communicator results file will get a good understanding of what has happened. All the information is stored in this one file, and it can include the creator information, product information, information about the model, the analysis, and we can compare the information in the MFR file against a criteria file. So in the analysis criteria file, this is basically a file that can be used to compare studies to analyze whether the processing conditions for that study are acceptable. So before making your criteria file, you may sit down with colleagues, the customer, to decide what they want from the analysis, certain materials, which type of analysis, are they looking for certain results, processing conditions to be followed in the analysis, and we can set all this into a criteria file and save that file. We then have the option when exporting the MFR file to be read into Communicator, if this criteria file is included. And if it is included, we can actually restrict what the end user sees. So there's an option to restrict contents of the criteria file. So then when you're checking the study in Communicator against the criteria, they're not going to see all the other results. So you may like limit it to melt temperature, mold temperature used, what was the fill time, but things like frozen layer, pressures, you may want to hide certain things that they can see. And to open the results file in Communicator, you launch Communicator, you browse for your MFR file, it remembers a list of previously opened MFR files. The wizard only appears on the first opening. After that, we just have to do a file open and you would navigate to your MFR file. And there's a few options when the wizard launches. By default, it's on Visualise Result. So with this, if there happens to be two studies in the one MFR file, Visualise Results will mean it will just open and display the first study. If you click on Compare Results and there's two studies in the one communicator file, it will open and lock the results, lock the rotation between the two. I'll show all this in the demo. And if you want to quantify the results, you can then select the criteria file that you want to quantify that particular MFR file against. We normally can do that within the software. It's unusual if you do it straight away from the wizard. And then you click Finish, and then everything will be displayed. So now I will go into the demonstration just to show how we go about things. So this is about Communicator, but we have to start in Synergy. So I've got a simple project, 2 parts in Synergy. Now a few things you should think about before writing out your MFR file, because you understand your project, you know what you've done, it all makes sense to you, but you've got to think that you're going to be sending this file to colleagues, customers that may not know much about the analysis or what you've done. So to make it a bit user-friendly, some tips or things that you should do before exporting. One thing a lot of customers do, especially what we see when we receive models for support purposes, is the naming of the layers. So down here we have the typical new triangles that's created when you mesh apart a new node. So that means customer will know their triangles, but it's better to rename these. So you might call this rename phone cover. Just ain't simple, but just make it a bit more user friendly for the end user. And you might call cover nodes or part nodes, maybe. It's up to you, but just be aware, make this a bit more user friendly. Default layer, there's always one called default layer because the software has to start with something. That normally ends up having your injection cone on. It isn't. So in this case, maybe select the injection cone, highlight the layer and assign it. Maybe rename it. All this is just to make things user-friendly. Injection cone. Parasite surfaces, well, we can keep them there. The other thing to do is I'm going to be doing a few exports of MFR files, so it doesn't get a bit confusing. In Communicator, under View, User Interface, we can actually turn on the study title. So now that name appears in this window. Again, if you're sending it to an end user, you may think to change the name of your study before exporting. Generally, you would do this before running results. You can do it afterwards, but you have a set of results linked to this name, so it may be something you don't want to do post analysis. So that's marking. So then the next thing is actually marking what you want to export. So we can right click on any result and mark it for export. Or if you don't want to export that one, we can click on it and unmark for export. And we also have the option, if you want to say, put these away for future reference, we could mark all for export. We are able now to mark every result for an export in an MFR file. If you've been used to using the software for many years, there was a limit of 8 results from each analysis type in the past, but that's no longer applies. one thing that's always marked for export, if you don't mark any results, is the log file. So you have to decide if you want to include the analysis log for your customers to see. So by default, you'll notice that asterisk is there because that one is always marked for export. So if you're writing a criteria file and you're limiting the information you want the customer to see in this MFR file, it's good practice to unmark the logs. Otherwise, all that information you've hidden will be visible to the customer. So basically, we will go in and right-click. We will mark a couple for export. So we'll do fill time, maybe pressure at VP. I'm not going to go do too many. We can probably have a plot like that. And here we've run some warp analysis, so we can mark them. As you're doing this, if I just exported now, the results would not include any of the marked results. So always remember to hit save. One other point is before you send this off, it's okay for your end user customers seeing lots of nice pictures, but it's good that if you've run the analysis, you're the expert, you know what you've done, you've interpreted the results, is to write some notes. So to write the notes, we need to turn on the relevant result, and we need to go up to plot notes, which is not on by default. And here we have two types of notes. We have the study note. So this will be a note that's seen for the whole study. So whichever plot you're on, you will see the study note. And then for each individual plot, we can write a few words, which will be seen in Communicator. So you can just go back down, and you have to turn on each result for the plot note for that result. And then we can just write V3. Okay, it's up to you what you write. And maybe the study note is going to be a bit more information about what you've done, you've run, what analysis conditions maybe. So we go through that and hit save. Now we need to, the last thing we need to do inside Synergy is create our criteria file. So I'm going to create a criteria file, and after that I'll be exporting this study and the other model a few times. So one with criteria file, one without, one with a limited one, and then we'll work in Communicator to show you how that all works and what we've actually done. So just before we go forward, I'm going to open the other part to show you one other feature that may be useful. So again, I will mark a few results the same. So I think I did that. It doesn't have to be the same results. Temperature at flow front on this one maybe. And bulk temperature. I haven't wrote any notes, but I will just write, I don't think so. Yep, some notes. So the idea of this, why I've modeled this, you may have a scenario where you've got a full mold or other features you don't want the end user to see. Now, we can't hide layers when we export the MFR file. So again, you may want to make one layer that you can say do not use, or give it a name that is like hidden or NA, not applicable. So what I'm going to do in this case, I'm going to leave one of the calling channels so you can see what happens. But here we have two calling channels. I've only run a fill pack and warp analysis, so it's no point giving the customer extra information that isn't relevant to the analysis I've run. So the trick here is to look at the display of the entities that are on that layer. And so here we have node, and I can turn the visibility off. So the node, this layer contains beam elements, curves, and the boundary conditions. Close. And that way it's hidden. So the layer will be exported, but of course the customer, when he turns on that second layer, he won't be able to see any entities or any parts of the model you don't want them to see. And again, I will hit save. So now my two studies are sort of prepared, ready to be exported. So let's have a quick look at the criteria file, how that works. So we go into the results tab and export and publish and criteria. This takes a few seconds to build the table. Now in the criteria file, it has everything to do with the analysis and drop downs. So some of the drop downs you can only choose from a list. Other drop downs you can enter in values. And basically it's a set of conditions that you want to compare the studies with. So you can compare studies one against each other, or you can compare the study against the criteria file. And it seems to be taking longer than normal. So this is the criteria editor. So what we will do in here, we will want to maybe compare what analysis what software we've run it in. So we should have the option of Advisor or Insight. What release? Now I'm using 18.1. There are some differences you'll see when we look at the criteria file with how we've coded the back end compared to the release names. But what mesh type do you want to use? And we may be saying the material family you want to compare against. The process settings, maybe you've discussed what temperature range you want to use. So this is a polypropylene, quite a wide range. I think the default for this one's around 210, 220, I can't remember. So let's say here we can put 200 to 220. So what happens to the criteria file is a bit like the compare function we already have in Synergy. It highlights the results in the study that are different to what you've agreed on in the criteria file. So I'd better put a few other machine name, maximum injection pressure. Put some figures. Mass, I've got no idea about what it's going to be on this analysis. And then we can hit OK or give the name as we're doing it. So we can say criteria example. Oh, that's opening it, so let's save it there. Criteria example. Save. So now my file is saved. Right. I'm now going to export. So we'll do a few exports and then we can see how they appear in Communicator. So we'll take the first, so basically highlight the study you want to export and go up to the application menu, and we're going to publish Moldflow results file. I've already got a couple there. I'll make a new one actually. So I'll call this one single, and with criteria. So we save that. And if we want to include a criteria file, and we can go and find that one I just created. We say OK. And I will do that again, but this time I will actually restrict what you can see in the criteria file. So again, single, and I will call that one restricted. All right, and then include that, find the criteria file, and this time we can restrict it. So this time when you send the MFR file to your customer, they're not going to be able to see all the other criteria in the file. Okay, that's that one. And the last thing is exporting two studies, and it's as simple as holding down the control or the shift key. We can only export up to two studies in one MFR file. So if you have a longer list of results and you want to choose and pick which ones, it's the control key, or if they're in the together, shift, doesn't matter. Same thing, we go up to publish, MFR file, and call this one two studies. Save. And I'm just going to save that, ignoring the criteria file in this case. We're going to compare two studies. We can afterwards choose a criteria file from the list to compare with within Communicator. So click OK, and that will be a bit larger. You see there 3.92. And I think that's everything within Synergy. So Beth, do we have any questions at this point on what I've done inside Synergy and the preparation for exporting?
Hey, Paul. No, I don't see any specific questions to what you've demonstrated so far. So I'd say at this point, we can go ahead and transition into Communicator.
Okay, so that's good.
Great, thank you.
So here, I'm just going to start Communicator. I'm doing it just the first time to show the wizard that pops up. So here we have Communicator. And the first time you get the launch wizard, so we can go and browse for your files. So in this case, I will choose the single with criteria and do open. So basically it will read in the criteria file that I've created, and that's chosen the file. Next. So again, we can visualize or compare results. I know in this MFR file there's a single study, so I don't really need to set compare. We could also at this point, if you had a criteria, there's one included. If there wasn't, you could browse for one to compare with, but we normally do that within the software. So you click on finish, and there we have our model with the 4 results I exported. And we can rotate, and we have the different layers. So this one wasn't the one without the calling. You can see down the bottom here we have the study notes and the plot notes. So if we turn on, I didn't actually export the fill time, but maybe pressure, yeah, VP is 11, okay. So you can see how the plot notes and the study notes come through. There is some dynamic help for the customer, but I haven't installed it, so you can download and install the help. So I'll just shut that window down for now. This one had the criteria file, so we can do quantify, and it's asking me if I want to use an alternative criteria file. That's because I exported this particular MFR file with one, but if we have others in our list, we could choose a different one, but I'm going to say no. And here we can see on the right, it's a bit like comparing studies. We have the criteria we set, and on the left is just all the results. And you can see here we have the full list. So if you were just trying to be specific about what results you were trying to compare with to the end user, to the customer, and that, you may want to restrict it to show specific things. So here we can see my temperature are set, default molded machine. Now the ones highlighted in yellow are showing you something that's different to what you've specified in the criteria. I could have done a range there rather than typing in 50, but of course we can see it's highlighting that my injection pressure is lower than what my maximum is or what I wanted to specify, so that might be something that's good. We can show only rows with criteria, and this will be a bit like the second import I do with the restricted criteria. And we can do just show rows with differences. You may notice a few strange things where the release up here is slightly different. So R1 is 0.1, but I think we had some code changing just before release, so there will be some subtle changes there. Right, so now I will just close that one down and open the restricted MFR file. And here, if we do quantify, you can see the criteria file only has the info. So it's a bit like the other one where we said show only results with criteria. It's limited the user that they cannot see other results to compare. I've only done a limited set, but if it was your own live project, you probably have a more understanding of what you want to include and what you want people to see. Okay. And now I will close that one down and show you, I think I will close the communicator down completely, and I'm going to read in the double study. So again, you will browse for your communicator file you've been sent, and mine was 2 studies. And next. Again, you could open compare, but I'm going to do visualize. Now, if you just do visualize, although I've got 2 studies, it will open the first of the 2. We can open both once we're inside communicator. So here it shows the 1 study, again, results. Now, one feature that you can do inside Synergy and in communicator is if you've got 1 study open and you want to compare results quickly, I mean, we have got the options under the view command to go lock view, lock plots, etc. if you have 2 studies open, so I can show you that. I mean, if I, what are we in? Center. If I open the end one, and you can see there actually that there's that empty channel. So you can see the idea of hiding your calling circuit or the features you don't want customers to see. So we could have 2 studies next to each other, and we could do tile, horizontal. This top one rotates, the bottom one doesn't. We can go lock view, so they both rotate together, or unlock all views. But a little trick that you may or may not know, that if you've got 1 study open, if you grab the one you want to compare, just grab it, pull it across and drop it on top of this one. You can do open study to compare this result. This is the same, this functions inside Synergy as well. Do OK. And just tile, probably horizontal. Here you can see it's actually locked all views. It's locked all animations, and it's locked results. So in this case, when there's a result that you haven't included, it can't show on the second model, so it will just turn that result off. And again, deflection all results. We've got the, and then we can also do things like, we've got these 2 studies, we could actually quantify them at this stage. So we can click on quantify, and I've only got 1 example of the criteria file, so you can click on that, open, and now we're comparing both studies with that criteria file. Okay, so there's a difference there in both analysis. Of course, we expect that with the pressure being an end gate and a center gate. And we have all the other commands like examine. I'm in a warpage result. Let's go to temperature at flow front. And if you do the examine, you've got that holding down control, you can get many. We can also, in here, you then may want to save off the file animation or to the clipboard what you're looking at. And I think that is most of the things it can do. Is there any questions, or Javier, do you think I've missed anything? Okay. Mesh statistics, so we've got details about the mesh. So Beth, is there any questions at this point? I think the
Hi, Paul. No additional questions at this time. Maybe we can stick around for a moment to see.
Okay. It's all meant to be very simple, this program, like exporting the results, sending, viewing. It's meant to make it more easier to understand and interpret the results.
So, Paul, I do have one question here. Is there a way to create a report within Communicator?
Not within Communicator itself. So this could complement a report. So you could write a report using the new report generator in Synergy and send a report off to your customer, and also an MFR file to complement it. Because of course, with the report, we've got static images, we have some animations. The beauty of Communicator is the end user is able to sort of look at and play around with the results like you can in Synergy. One thing I didn't do, I mean, you could even do things like make new plots in Synergy and scale the results and do that as well. But no, there's no way of making the report from within Communicate. It's basically a viewer.
Great, thanks, Paul. Another question we have here. Are you expecting to increase the 2 iterations comparison in Communicator? So, for example, maybe a 3 iteration comparison?
That I don't think so at this stage. I mean, if you include all results, etc., it can get quite large. And I mean, it's been 2 for quite a long time. We can find that out. We can check with.
Yep, and that may be something good.
The product line manager, because yeah, that may be.
Post to our Moldflow idea station also.
I was going to say the same.
Yep. Great. Let's see. I don't see any other questions right now. Maybe one item worth mentioning also is that we can't customize the results display within Communicator, correct, Paul?
No. So basically it's up to the person creating the MFR file to do all the customization. So if you go in here, if you go back to here and I'll choose this one. If you go in here and we make maybe make a new plot, fill time, animation. Okay, so I've got a new fill time plot. And you would have to do it all in here and do the scaling. So we might specify between 0.5 and 1, then you turn off extended color. So all that type of thing, if you're interested in a certain area or you would have to do that and then mark that result for export and read that in. But that's all done in Synergy.
Great, thank you.
So if people are on the call that haven't got Synergy but are more interested in Communicator, then of course it'd be up to you. Would have to sort of specify maybe what sort of results you'd want, and that's where you'd sit down and say that I need these results, etc. If you are going to start doing this a lot at some you can when we cover our macros at a later stage, and you may want to automate each time. You may say, yes, I need bulk temperature, pressure end of fill, etc. Fill time. You may have certain results that you're always going to write out to an MFR file. You can write yourself a simple macro that you just go to your macros, run, bang, all your results you want to export have been marked and possibly even exported. And you may even have a criteria, but that will be covered at a later stage.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay.
I think that's all we have as far as questions go. So with that, thank you very much, Paul. Great presentation on Communicator and exporting the MFR files into there. And again, we will be sending an email around later this afternoon or early tomorrow with a link to the webinar uploaded to YouTube, as well as to our box folder, the slide deck that was used for today. And with that, we'll go ahead and end the webinar. So thanks so much, Paul.